Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is Logan Camden. And boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about around the NFL today. We are going to do our power rankings as we're doing every other week throughout the season. But before we get into that, Logan, a lot of news has broken around the league over these last couple days, and we'll start with the story of the week. Robert Saleh has been fired by the New York Jets just 5 games into the season after losing back-to-back games to the Broncos and then most recently the Minnesota Vikings across the pond in London. So the Jets fall to 2-3 and they have given Saleh the boot. Do you think this was the right decision?
I don't think it was the right decision, and I want to start with what Woody Johnson said about the firing. He came out afterwards. First of all, I think he's delusional, but he said, "This is one of the most talented teams that has ever been assembled by the New York Jets. I wanted to give this team the most opportunity to win this season. I feel that we had to go in a different direction, and that's why I did that today. The change that we made today, I believe will bring new energy and positivity that will lead to more wins starting now." A little new energy and positivity, huh, Woody? Somebody's been talking to Aaron Rodgers. I don't think it was the right decision. And I want to be clear about something. I think you can think that Robert Saleh is a bad coach. I think that you can think he is a bad offensive mind. He was 20-36 in his career with the Jets. This has obviously been a slow start out of the gates for New York. And the Jets are dead last in scoring of any team since 2021 when Saleh took over. They're averaging 17.3 points per game. But I cut him slack there. I think he's been handcuffed to the worst quarterback situation in the league. And the side of the ball that he has been responsible for has been great. And the thing that gets me about this is just the timing of it all, Carson. I find it really, really strange because you ask yourself after this loss individually, who is most to blame for the loss against Minnesota? It's obviously the offense. The defense holds the red-hot Vikings to 16 points. Minnesota had been averaging 29 points per game coming into Week 5. And so then you look at the offensive side of the ball. It's on Aaron Rodgers or Nathaniel Hackett. Rodgers throws 3 interceptions. He gives the game away with the pick 6 to Van Ginkel. The whole situation just stinks to high hell to me, Carson. Saleh gets fired right after he announces that Todd Downing would take over. And so the biggest sin in all this to me is of the front office. First, giving more power to Aaron Rodgers than Robert Saleh. And whether that's advertent or inadvertent, when I look at this, you couldn't let Nathaniel Hackett go because you have now handcuffed yourself to Aaron Rodgers' guy. Because if Hackett goes, and that would have been Saleh's call, you potentially alienate your superstar quarterback, the leader of your team, in Aaron Rodgers. And so he can't go, and so the hammer comes down on Saleh. Like I said, man, the timing of this is all just strange to me. The fact that Saleh was going to bring the hammer down on Hackett, and then immediately after, he's going to make this change to let Todd Downing call plays. He gets fired. The fact that this game isn't his fault. And to be clear, this isn't the first time this has ever happened. This reminded me a lot, Carson, of last year when the Bills let go of Ken Dorsey after that game against Denver when they had 12 men on the field, and you go, well, it's clearly not Ken Dorsey's fault that they lost this football game. It's on Sean McDermott. But the hammer had to come down on somebody, and it comes down on Dorsey. And so that's just what it reminds me of. I don't know if Saleh is – I think Saleh's a good coach. I don't know if he's a great coach. We obviously haven't ever seen him with a good offense to prove that point. But it just seems like the wrong guy got the hammer, taken down on him. And the timing of it is just strange to me, man. I don't think this was Saleh's time to go. I think he's a good football coach. I don't think he coached a bad game against Minnesota. I think it's Rodgers and Hackett's fault. But he's the guy that's out of a job, man. What do you make of all of this? Do you think that Rodgers has got his fingerprints all over it, man? Do you think that this is the right decision? What do you think about this dysfunctional organization and this messed up situation?
I definitely think that Rodgers was involved in this decision. I do not think it was the right decision. You bring up the Dorsey comparison, and there's a big distinction I would make there. You are right in terms of the fact that if 12 men are not on the field, Ken Dorsey does not get fired, and it wasn't his fault that there were 12 men on the field. The difference is Ken Dorsey was bad at his job. I think Robert Saleh has been good at his job. And there was another thing that you said that stood out to me. You refer to Rodgers as their superstar quarterback and talk about how you can't bring the hammer down on him, give up on him. You can't make his guy Nathaniel Hackett pay. Here's the thing. Aaron Rodgers is not your superstar quarterback. They're treating Aaron Rodgers as if he is the star in the foundation of this team because he is the biggest name, because he is the quarterback, because there was so much hoopla and excitement when they brought him in, because they invested in him as the savior of this offense. He's not, though. He's a 40-year-old playing pretty average football. Your defense is your foundation. Your defense has been the only reason you were a competitive football team over the last few years. The only reason that you are still a decent football team this season. Like, throughout the entirety of Saleh's tenure, save his first year when he inherited a disastrous defense in terms of personnel, the last 3 years, they've been top 2 in yards per drive allowed every year. They've been top 5 in points per drive allowed. They are excelling. They are bought in. They are delivering. And that is ultimately Saleh's responsibility. And you can say, well, the offense hasn't progressed and we're just tired of that. And there's a reason that the league is moving towards offensive minds, right? We just want the ceiling that comes with a great offensive head coach. Okay, well, you're promoting your defensive coordinator to head coach. So obviously you're happy with the defense. You're not viewing Hackett as the guy, and you're not going to find that offensive mind mid-season, 5 weeks into the season. You can say the responsibility is on Saleh to hire the right dude to be in charge of the offense, right? He's in charge of the entire team, even if he's not an offensive mind, except he literally just hired Aaron Rodgers' guy. He was just trying to appease your quarterback, who, again, as you mentioned, Logan, he was considering firing, which absolutely makes it seem like Rodgers pushed for this just to save his guy in the moment, who hasn't been good at his job and who hasn't produced good results offensively. It's not Robert Saleh's fault that you put up 9 points against the Broncos with Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Rodgers' guy calling plays, and that you missed a game-winning field goal, right? That's not a coaching or offense or defense reflection. That's just a special teams play. It's not Saleh's fault that Rodgers threw 3 picks against Minnesota. This offense is broken. And by the way, I don't put a majority of the offensive failures on Rodgers whatsoever. I think this line is horrible. They have one of the worst run games in football, and Aaron Rodgers is just limited enough athletically at this stage that he can't save that group. I still think he's playing fine football, but he's not playing at the level where he should be your top priority organizationally. You have an amazing defense, and yes, it's very talented, but they took the leap under Saleh, and they've excelled under Saleh. So if you were ultimately gonna take a change in direction, say we want to bring in an offensive-minded guy after this season, if this full season was underwhelming, I would get it. I think that Saleh is a good football coach. I think he's a very good defensive coach. I think he's a good motivator. But I would understand if the results just weren't there and you felt the need to make a change. But what is that going to do now? Because I just don't get the impression at all that this is a move the team will rally around. I think this speaks to dysfunction. I think this speaks to panic. I think the defense is going to be discontent with this. And it's just really cruel to me when this dude has, again, made you a competitive football team with the worst quarterback play in the NFL over the last couple years. And 5 games into his first season with an actual quarterback, you pull the plug on him when his side of the ball is still delivering at a really high level. I believe in Saleh. I think if you put him with the right offensive coordinator, a decent offense, like, it could work. And there's certainly not an alternative that's better here. This just feels like we need to mix shit up. Rodgers doesn't want Hackett gone. Rodgers hasn't gelled with Saleh, so he wants him gone. I don't think it's best for the team whatsoever.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to solve their biggest issues. I want to add a little historical context to the situation. No team in NFL history has ever fired their coach mid-season and then gone on to make the playoffs in NFL history. It's never happened. So the Jets are fighting a historical uphill battle. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about the offensive struggles. To me, it's like Woody Johnson. I think you should be angry at your front office for what they've done over the past few years. Robert Saleh is not the one who drafted a complete bust with the number 2 pick at quarterback. He didn't draft Zach Wilson. He got stuck with Zach Wilson. He's not the guy who drafted Mekhi Becton. He's not the guy who drafted Elijah Vera Tucker, right? Like, he's not the guy making all these mistakes. And another big one, he's not the guy who let Bryce Hall walk for nothing. You guys made the choice to trade for Hassan Reddick, and this contract dispute is still going on. I'm completely out on the Jets, man. I was optimistic, Carson, that this team would figure it out as the season goes along. Again, when there's so many moving parts, it's honestly not surprising to me that the Jets have struggled this much offensively. Like, you have a brand new quarterback. You've got a lot of new pieces on the offensive line. You got a brand new offensive coordinator, a lot of new weapons. It's like, I'm not surprised it has taken time for the Jets to figure it out. And again, it's a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles tear. But the reason they suck is not Robert Saleh's fault. And
No.
again, man, it reminds me of like Russell Wilson in Denver a little bit when they were coddling him and they were giving him way too much power within the organization. It seems like Rodgers has too much power in the organization, and I don't know if Woody went to Aaron. Like, I'm not saying that Aaron went out and deliberately said after the game we went to Saleh, but if Woody consulted Aaron at all about this, I have to think that Aaron went to bat for Hackett. And again, what is that going to do? You don't want to upset his apple cart. Saleh's the guy that takes it. It stinks to high hell to me, man, and it's just messed up that it. As our good friend of the show, as Peyton T. Gallagher always said, man, when there's smoke, there's fire, and it seems like the Jets building is on fire right now. Just the bang way that this happened, that Saleh was going to let, not even fire Hackett. He was going to tell Hackett to step down, and that Downing was going to take over play calling, and immediately after he gets fired. But anyway, I'm out on the Jets, man. I think they're too dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're too dysfunctional. That's where I'm at with the Jets. I'm completely out on this team in the rest of the year. I think this defense is talented, but I think you have lost the soul of this team, man. I think Saleh was the leader of this team, the soul of this team, and now that he's gone, I just see a team in disarray, scrambling to find their identity and to find themselves. I'm disappointed, man, and I think Saleh's probably going to get picked up real soon here, man. I think there's probably a lot of teams that would be interested in having him on their staff.
Absolutely. Even if it's a brief stint as a defensive coordinator, I think he'd be one of the best defensive coordinators in football, and I definitely think he'll be back to a head coaching job. It's just a little bit harder to find if you are a defensively oriented coach, but definitely not impossible. Just to speak a little more to the likelihood that Aaron is involved in this is really pretty out of character for Woody Johnson, just when you look at how he's managed previous coaching situations. Now, the Jets haven't had the expectations that they did for this year under these previous guys, but everybody under his tenure has been allowed to finish out their final season. For Herm Edwards, that was going 4-12. The year after they made the playoffs, he still got to finish out his season. Rex Ryan finished a 4-12 season. Todd Bowles finished a 4-12 season. Adam Gase finished a 2-14 season. So then to fire Robert Saleh, who again has overachieved considering the talent on the roster historically more than those guys, 5 games into the year, to me that's out of character. And to me that does speak to some outside involvement from Aaron Rodgers, who perhaps had just finished up his daily perineum sunning and ayahuasca trip in his cave and decided that he had had enough. I have been such a huge fan of Aaron Rodgers as a football player over the years. I think he's one of the handful of greatest quarterbacks that we've ever seen. I think he is one of the 3 greatest pure talents that we've ever seen at the position. But what he's doing right now on the football field doesn't justify this level of chaos and dysfunction and drama that I do believe he is still bringing to the table. And he got some credit before last year for seeming like he was making a real effort to be a leader, but this to me just reeks of Rodgers being involved, and it's a bad decision.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because I thought after the press conference, Rodgers could have saved Saleh's job I think that if he had said and used his words differently. When they asked him about how bad his performance was, Rodgers' narcissistic ass, man. Well, you guys know I don't normally play like this. Yeah, Rodgers, we know. You've got 5 MVPs and a Super Bowl. You're one of the greatest. We know. We've been watching ball. You don't have to explain it to us. But that right there, I think, told you everything you need to know about his character, man. Because Rodgers could have gone out and said, I threw 3 picks. I threw a pick 6. This loss is on me. We're going to come back stronger. But he came out and said, well, I don't normally play like this. Yeah, we know, Aaron. But you did today. So what point are you trying to make, you jackass?
I agree. I think this is an average football team. I certainly don't think that this helps them. Now, I don't think that they're going to fall off a cliff in the short term. I just don't see how this helps them. And I think, honestly, at a time like this, if you have a head coach who I believe in as like an emotional core, stability is the best path to ride through the hard times. Now, if you have some jackass, like, yes, you can get that boost by letting him go. You fire Josh McDaniels, and all of a sudden, that can fire people up. I don't think you're getting that by letting Saleh go. I think you're getting confusion. I think you're getting frustration, and it's just too soon, man. 5 weeks because your offense played poorly 2 weeks in a row. It's just too soon, and the Jets really might just be cursed, man. I thought they were going to be a good football team. Some people said to me, they're just cursed, man. Don't underestimate the value of the curse. And me, what an idiot I am. My own hubris thinking, no, it only matters who's actually out there on the football team. Don't underestimate the curses, Logan. I think that they are very much in play right here. Let's go elsewhere in the AFC East, Logan, because the other big story that broke this week is that the Patriots are going to be starting Drake Maye. The Jacoby Brissett era, glorious as it was, is now over. Do you think that's the right decision to start Maye already, Logan? And what are you expecting out of him?
And hell no, I think the Patriots are throwing my boy Drake Maye to the wolves, man. I don't really get this one. I mean, like, you just think about what the Patriots are going to accomplish this season. Nothing. You're tanking. Your team sucks. Hard. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. And, like, the whole point of having Jacoby Brissett at the helm was to let Drake Maye take the reins over when you feel he is ready and maybe when the schedule breaks your right way. And so to me, if you were going to do it, it would have been against Miami. Miami sucks. They're depleted. Their defense isn't that good. Like, I'm not surprised at all that Drake Maye is a star. Duh. You know, it was going to happen at some point this year. Eventually, the organization, the team, the fans, they were all going to get frustrated with Jacoby Brissett throwing for 140 yards a game and not winning you football games. Also, the Patriots won that game. I know what the rule says. That's a touchdown. I mean, Jesus Christ, man. Now that I've actually watched that back, I don't know how that was not ruled a touchdown. Carson, I think we have all collectively lost our marbles.
It's the rule. I agree with you.
Let me ask you something.
The rule is wrong, but if it's not a toe tap or a drag with the second foot, then by the rules, it's not a touchdown.
He got his toe down.
He got the entire balls of his feet, the entire front of his foot, as if he were just taking a step. I think it's dumb, but it's the rule. I just don't think we can say the Patriots got robbed because the refs didn't make a mistake.
They did.
The rules committee you can take issue with. Okay. Talk to refs.
It's idiotic, man. Like, we don't... Calvin Johnson, Dez Bryant, Jesse James, man, it sent us down a collision course where we cannot correct, dude. We don't know what a catch is anymore.
I think it's counterintuitive that that's not a catch.
All right, anyway.
The rules committee.
Yeah, I'm going to write you guys a very strongly worded letter.
As you should.
I think that was a touchdown, and so... like the domino effect here, the butterfly effect, I think Jacoby would still be starting if they had won that game, obviously, if he had thrown the game-winning TD. But my point is, you want to give Drake Maye, like, the cupcakiest, easiest schedule that he could go in, and now you're going to be having him... It's just... the timing doesn't make sense to me. I'm glad that we're going to see him out here. Like, I think, obviously, he was going to play at some point this year. I think he's better than Jacoby. I think he's going to be a better playmaker, but... I think this offensive line sucks. I think the skill position talent is some of the worst in the league, and I just don't think he's a major needle mover at this point. So I just hope the guy stays healthy. I hope that he is not overwhelmed. The Patriots' offensive situation is just one of the worst in the league. Like, when we're looking at worst. I was going to say, like, when we're looking at young quarterbacks stepping into situations, I don't think Bo Nix's is great, but when, like, you compare it to Drake Maye's, it's a complete step up from what he's dealing with. We always talk about situations and quarterbacks and how they can affect their development, like Bryce Young with the Panthers. I just don't want them to ruin him from a really young age. And this is the worst quarterback situation in football. So I don't like the timing. I mean, I would have liked maybe a little bit later in the season, but best of luck to him, man. I don't think it's going to go well, Carson. Like, I think Drake Maye's a good quarterback. I think he's talented. This situation just stinks.
It's a horrible, horrible situation. I think it's going to be rough for Drake out the gate. I do think, though, it was only a matter of time until this happened. Like, when you have a top 3 pick standing in the wings, your fan base, your organization is only going to tolerate being the worst offense in football for so long before they at least give them a shot. The offense is 31st in yards per play. They're the number 31 scoring offense. Even worse than that, Logan, is the passing attack specifically. They're averaging 5 yards per pass attempt. They have 597 net passing yards. That's just passing yards minus sack yards. And 2 passing touchdowns in 5 weeks of football. Brissett didn't have a single game with 150 net passing yards. That's unfathomable. And you mentioned the touchdown call, the non-touchdown call last week, which they didn't get. But at the end of the day, they just had to put up 17 points and they win that game, and they didn't do it. So I understand looking at your defense and saying it's a competitive defense. Jacoby Brissett is playing as easily one of the worst starters in football. We're done with him. Let's get our future out there. Let's get him game experience. Let's inject a little bit of excitement into the fan base. And I am really high on Maye. I think he's a special arm talent. He's very creative. He's audacious with the throws that he'll attempt. He makes stuff happen outside the pocket. He can really move. He's big. He's strong. I think he's smart. There are a lot of elite quarterback traits that I buy into with him, but this is an exceedingly difficult situation. And I do think in the one drive we saw from him against the Jets in garbage time of that game, he looked a little overwhelmed. You're just under duress a lot, even against the Jets defense that isn't being aggressive at that point, isn't playing with maximum effort. He stood, he delivered a couple throws, he made a play with his legs. He ended up getting them into scoring range. They couldn't finish the drive because time ran out, but it was against the Jets defense that wasn't giving their all. I mean, they converted multiple 4th downs on the way there. It was a very weird drive. He was kind of fighting an uphill battle the whole time because everyone around him sucks, and he can't save that. He's a rookie quarterback. Maybe he's started to understand the game at the NFL level better, but it's only been 5 weeks that he's been sitting. It's probably the worst offensive line in football. It's probably the worst receiving core in football. I just think when we look around the league at how debuts have gone for these guys, at how the first few weeks of football have gone, it's a struggle. I do think he can be better than Brissett. Maybe not his first week as a starter, but pretty soon this year just because he's so much more talented.
That bar ain't very high, you know?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, they've been the worst passing attack in football. And I don't think this situation will break him. Like, I think we've talked some about these young quarterbacks getting just mentally destroyed because they're in such awful situations and they start seeing ghosts. While I think there's some truth to that, I also don't think that happens to you if you're legitimately good, right? Zach Wilson gets broken, he's not good. A Bryce Young gets broken, he's not good. I think Drake Maye is, first of all, just more physically gifted than those guys, especially than a Bryce. Like, he's just so much more NFL ready as an athlete. And I think he's a tough kid. So I think that he's going to succeed in this league. I do think it's good to get him reps. They're just going to be really hard reps. And the Texans are not an easy opening matchup, Logan. That's been a really good defense. And specifically, the one area they struggle is against the run. So maybe you get the run game going to help take some load off his plate. But in the passing game, I mean, it's an elite pass rush and it's a pretty elite secondary. So with this line, with that receiving core, like, it could be a brutal week 1 as a starter for Drake Maye. I might have waited 1 week to start him versus the Jags. That's a more favorable defensive matchup, but I get that the pressure is mounting right now. And at the end of the day, you can't protect him forever. Like, you got a tough schedule. He's going to have to face tough defenses. He's going to have to grow up in the league. I don't think that this is a bad decision. This was going to happen at some point soon. And I do think it's good that they bought him a few weeks. Because at first I was like, just start Drake Maye. But really, having seen this offense in action, I think they needed to buy him a little bit of time to sit and figure things out mentally. But the way that he's going to really figure things out is by playing. And you just can't trot Jacoby Brissett out there for a full year like this.
Yeah, you got to take the kid gloves off at some point. And honestly, Carson, I don't know if they're going to stress Drake too much. I wonder if their offensive recipe is going to be similar to what they did with Jacoby, just in terms of how run-heavy they've been. Mm-hmm. Like, I wonder if the Patriots just keep trying to run the ball the way they have and, you know, just not force him to take the brunt of the whole offense on his shoulders. I do think he's going to be better than Jacoby. I'd be surprised if he didn't throw for more than 150 yards in week 1. Just Jacoby is so conservative, and they have been so run-heavy. But I'm really looking at Drake to create with his legs. That's the one area where I'm really probably most excited for him, is just as an athlete, running at an empty set or getting out of the pocket and scrambling and creating with his own legs, because I think that's what really separates him from some of these other young quarterbacks. You're talking about those elite traits that he possesses. He does have the big arm. He's got the athleticism in the body, but it's the scrambling skill set that I think makes him really, really special, especially in the red zone. So that's where I'm really looking for him in week 1 against Houston, is seeing what kind of creation he can have for himself. But I just don't want to see him hit the dirt a ton, man. I don't want to see him take a lot of sacks. And again, if they get behind early against Houston, right, the game script flips, say you're down 2 touchdowns early, and then you're in a lot of passing situations, that's where I worry about him a little bit. But I don't know, man. This doesn't change my season outlook a ton for the Patriots. I'm going to be honest. I still got them probably winning maybe 3 games. Maybe they win another 2 this year with Drake.
No, dude, he's going to take a lot of sacks. Also, Jacoby was taking a lot of sacks. He took 17 in 5 games. The one drive that we saw from Drake, he took 2 sacks. Like, it's the single hardest thing for a rookie quarterback to do, to process the game at NFL speed immediately, and he is doing it with dudes who don't separate in an offensive line that isn't going to buy him any time. Like, I think he's going to take a lot of hits, might get eaten alive a little bit back there. I think week 1 they're probably going to get destroyed. Overall, though, I think it's an upgrade in the short term, and I think that this will be positive for him in the long term, just getting him out there sooner, getting him game reps. It's not about winning now, because the Patriots aren't going to win now no matter what. I mean, this offense is just a disaster. Drake Maye can't change that on his own as a rookie. Logan, let's talk about a team that is very much on the opposite side of the spectrum. The Kansas City Chiefs did receive some bad news before their Monday Night Football game against the Saints, that Rashee Rice, despite avoiding an ACL tear, is nevertheless going to miss the season with a knee injury. Adam Schefter hilariously switched up his reporting on that in like 2 minutes. He said, yeah, he'll be good. And then he said, no, actually, he's going to be out for the season. Not a good reporter, that Adam Schefter, I have to say, Logan. Makes a lot of mistakes. A lot of mistakes you don't see from his NBA counterparts. But that's bad news for Chiefs fans, of course. However, they still went out there. They won their game against the Saints quite comfortably. How does your outlook on Kansas City change, knowing that they will be without Rice for the season?
I mean, my take on the Chiefs doesn't change that much with Rashee out. Like, I think they are very capable of withstanding this injury. Like, when you have Mahomes, I think the reason they've been running the ball so much, because eventually, hopefully, they get Pacheco back. Kareem Hunt's been doing a pretty good job in his absence. When you have Mahomes and you're facing so many of those 2 high safety looks, that's the reason they're running the ball so much, right? And so I think that when you have a guy like Mahomes under center, and you're going to be facing so many weak boxes with so many 2 high safety looks with this good of an offensive line, I think the Chiefs are going to be able to run the ball basically on anybody. And then when you look at the receiving group, Rashee Rice is a legitimate difference maker, right? I don't want to undersell how great of a receiver he is. He's a really good number 1, and he blossomed last year. And with him and Kelsey together, you have 2 legitimate number 1 targets that can kill you on any given day. And so obviously the depth and the top-end talent in that room has taken a bit of a hit, but I still think that the Chiefs' receiving room might be better than it was last year when they won the Super Bowl down Rashee Rice.
Really?
I mean, you've got Juju Smith-Schuster stepping back into a role. And I know Juju drops that touchdown, but I think he's better than that. I think he's a good receiver still. Xavier Worthy is still explosive, and you can hit those home runs. And Kelsey's finally been able to get going. I think the Chiefs have done a better job of deliberately drawing up plays to get Kelsey open over these past couple of weeks. And so, yeah, I mean, when you have the best quarterback that I've ever seen, and you have probably the defense that I have the most confidence in week to week in the National Football League, I think the Chiefs are the most well-equipped team to withstand an injury like this. And again, it lowers the margins. It makes the margins even closer between them and the top teams in the AFC. But the Chiefs are still probably atop my power rankings. We'll get into that in a little bit, but it doesn't move them off. It doesn't make them my not favorite. They've got the quarterback. They've got the defense. They've got the running game. They've still got talent in the receiving room. I'm still very much in on the Kansas City Chiefs, man. It makes the margins closer between them and other teams, but it's the defense and it's the quarterback in the coaching. They've got the strongest backbone of any organization in football right now, and that doesn't change without any of those groups, the defense, the QB, or the coaching staff taking a hit. They haven't lost in their key areas. So I still very much believe in the Chiefs and their Super Bowl chances.
I do disagree when you say you think that the receiving core is better than last year's, because I've seen a lot of people say that. I would rather have Rashee out there than Juju and Worthy. Like, I think that Rashee is a stud.
You get what I'm saying, though. I mean, the guys, but like MVS and
absolutely, but they don't have Rashee.
Kadarius
My point
Toney.
is, I would rather have Rashee than the depth that they have this year. Like, obviously, the depth of the receiving core this year is way better than last year. They bring in Juju. They add Worthy.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I'm just saying I think they're more equipped to withstand this injury this year than they would have been last
no
year.
question. No question about that. But I had people in my replies when my gut reaction was like, it's going to be hard for them to win the Super Bowl without Rashee this year, being like, you should see the core they did it with last year. And last year's core was worse. And I just don't think that's true. Rashee was a reliable force in the playoffs. He was only playing better this year. I think that is a significant loss. However, I also think that I overreacted with my gut reaction, which was that it's going to be really hard for them to win the Super Bowl. I think I was wrong about that. I think they absolutely can. And the biggest reason for that isn't about the offense. I think this very well could be the best defense in football, Logan. The Jets are up there. The Broncos are up there. The Steelers are up there. I think the Vikings are arguably up there.
I think the Chiefs
but this
might
group
take
is just
the cake,
absolutely
man.
ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, they're just unbelievable. They lose Snead. It doesn't matter. The corner play alongside McDuffie has still been good. They haven't missed Snead. They're fourth versus the run in terms of yards allowed per attempt. They're second in pressure rate. That front, just on the back of Chris Jones, is so effective. They're a top 5 scoring defense right now, and they faced 3 top 5 scoring offenses, Logan. Like, holding the Ravens to 20 in retrospect, pretty damn impressive considering what they've done to everybody else. The Saints, we saw just explode several times early in the year. They hold them to 13 points and 220 total yards. Like, even the Falcons and the Chargers, these are capable offenses that have been held completely in check by the Kansas City defense. They feel like the best third down defense to me, even though the numbers don't say that right now, just with how Spags dials up blitzes. I mean, situationally, the play calling is just so good. They put so much pressure on you. Derek Carr this past week is literally just backpedaling furiously, taking as deep a drop as fast as he can, and then just throwing the ball up because he fears for his life because of the heat that's coming down on him. Like, all those factors just instill so much confidence in the team for me. The fact that I really do trust this defense, probably more than any other in football. But also, I do think that I underestimated specifically Juju Smith-Schuster, and I do think that he can really produce here. I don't think he's nearly as good as Rashee, but I do think that we just saw him underutilized last year in New England, which was also, like, again in the conversation for the worst offense in football. I would rather have Rashee than Juju and Worthy, as I said. And unless Hollywood comes back, which seems unlikely, then I do think last year's receiving core was still a little bit better, even though the depth is better this year because of the Rashee factor. But Juju is legitimately a reliable wide receiver. He's a dude who can get open over the middle of the field. He's not very boom or bust in the way that a Worthy is. He can fill more of that Rashee role for this offense. And ultimately, everybody's flawed this year. Like, I don't see a team as good as San Francisco last year, right? Who, at times in the regular season, we felt were an actual juggernaut. I'm not sure that there's a team as good as last year's Ravens. Could be that this year's Ravens are. They've improved offensively, but they've taken a step back defensively. Like, that's the thing. When there's vulnerability elsewhere, the Chiefs have the best defense. They have the best quarterback. They probably have the best coach. They certainly have the best coaching staff when you combine defense and offense. And I'm just not impressed. I'm not blown away enough by anybody around them to say that they can't do it or that they shouldn't even be at this point a slight favorite to do it.
Yeah, and I specifically want to hone in on, like, the running defense. That's where I've been most impressive, dude. Like, they shut down everything. You just can't run the ball in the Chiefs. And they've got so many playmakers at so many different levels, man. Some of the guys that like don't get a ton of mention, like Nick Bolton's been awesome this year. Leo Chenal, Shamari Connor has been such a big difference maker. There's just guys everywhere making plays, and I got to tip my cap to Spags, man. Like, I think he just gets these guys prepared. They noted the defensive system, like Karlaftis, Wharton, Drew Tranquil. It doesn't matter. Like, these guys just step up and they make plays, and that's been the strength of this team for 2 years running now. Like, Mahomes can get all the shine because he's the guy winning the Super Bowls, and he is a massive difference maker. And I don't care what the numbers say, because that dude, I don't know, man, Rob Parker from Fox Sports or whatever, that guy's had some crazy takes.
Of course.
The Brady one for the longest, but he said something about the Chiefs being, and he's just looking at the stats. He's not watching games, but he was like, yeah, the Chiefs remind me of Daniel Jones with an elite defense. And it's like, bro, like, please, man. Mahomes and Daniel Jones don't belong in the same conversations.
That offended you personally for obvious reasons.
It did, man. That angered me. So Mahomes may get all the shine, and Mahomes is a massive difference maker. You see how this offense still was able to get humming without Rashee Rice out there against New Orleans. But the defense is the strength of this team. And I love that identity, man. I'm an old school football guy, Carson. You know that. I love teams that play great defense. I love teams that can run the ball. And I love teams that have great quarterbacks. Like, the Chiefs check all of my big-time boxes when it comes to Super Bowl contender. And Rashee's a big loss. I'm not going to act like it isn't. Like, it takes an element of dynamism from the Chiefs offense. Those explosive plays, those big shot plays. And it could come back to bite them on the ass. I can definitely see it happening. Tight game, say against Baltimore, against Buffalo. You need to create a final drive down the field to go and kill them. And you're down a difference maker. And that could be the margin that ends up killing you. But I'm not going to bet on it. I'm going to bet on the Chiefs to keep winning nasty, gritty, defensive, nasty smash mouth football games. It's the way they've won for 2 years, and I think that formula is very, very replicable week in, week out, man. I very much believe in the Chiefs.
These games are super gritty, dude, but you talk about the Mahomes stuff and not caring about the numbers. He's the best quarterback in football. He hasn't played like it this year, though. This past week, I would say, was the first good game that he's played. Like, he leads the league in picks right now. He has as many touchdowns as he does interceptions. Like, this has been far from the Patrick Mahomes that we're used to through 5 games, and yet they are 5-0, having beaten 5 teams that are all at least solid. And that should terrify us, because this is what they did last year. I mean, except they're not even losing games right now, but it's not pretty. But they find a way, they grind it out, and you cannot underestimate the dominance of that defense. So 1 week, I think that already I overreacted a bit, and really the Chiefs are impossible to count out. They are just a winning machine right now. So we'll see. I definitely want to see more out of this offense, and I really don't like the run game as much as you do, Logan. They commit to it, but it's not efficient, and it does feel like it can sort of bog the offense down when they're just grinding out, 3-yard pickup, and sometimes the drives are stalling because of that. I'd like to see the run game be more efficient.
I think it's a hallmark of a controlled football team. It reminds me a lot of what the Niners do, and obviously the Niners run the ball way more efficiently than they do.
Much more efficiently.
But they've just had turnovers that come back to bite them. I love how much the Chiefs run the ball. They control it. They don't let the other offense get on the field. They sustain drives. They burn the clock. And they are going to punish you if you have, Mahomes checks to runs all the time when he notices that he's got numbers in the box. I love it, personally. I think letting Mahomes go and cook when you need him to get him into short, second downs and third downs. I like the running game, man. And, I mean, they've been down Pacheco, too. I think that's important to contextualize. I mean, their running game has been shit because they've got Carson Steele out there running the ball. Like, I love how the Chiefs play football, man. I like their identity. I like their scheme. And I like the balance of the offense. I know that you'd like to see them take more shots. I think it's a little more sustainable, and I think it's a little more controlled, and that's why I like it.
It's not about shots. They're just not good at running the football. Like, I like the balance, too. They've just got to be more efficient. I mean, we can't compare them to the Niners. The Niners are a dominant rushing attack. That's the foundation of their offense. Like, I am pro balance for the Chiefs. I am pro not having everything rest on Pat's shoulders. But I think if they can put the ball in their best players' hands a little bit more, like it's just that simple. There's a very clear ceiling on this offense when they are as run heavy as they've been. Hasn't cost them, but it hasn't been very impressive.
I think we're seeing them. They're working through the kinks, I think, right now. And New Orleans isn't that good, I'm going to be honest. So that's probably not the biggest game to make takeaways from. But
they're a solid defense.
They're solid, but I want to see them against a really good team like this. But I think they're figuring it out. I think the Chiefs are going to be just fine.
Yeah, I definitely think that they're going to be just fine. And this was their best week yet. One more story, Logan, before we get to our power rankings, and this one relates to your Pittsburgh Steelers. We touched on this a little bit after their Sunday Night Football loss to the Cowboys. George Pickens, notably, was barely involved in that game, was only on the field for 59% of the team's snaps.
Mm-hmm.
His absence was very much felt, and afterwards, Mike Tomlin was asked about this. There just seems to be a little bit of drama brewing here. Are you worried about this situation with Pickens, Logan?
What's new, man? The Steelers find a new damn diva receiver every single season, man. First it was AB, and then it was Martavis, and then it's Juju. It's damn, man. I just want football players, man. I want guys that want to go and win the freaking game. Real quick, as an aside, I was playing pickup basketball, man, and I felt my ego in the back of my mind talking, and he went, damn, man, I want somebody to pass me the ball so I can go and make a play. And then I went, man, I'm going to put my ego aside right now because I don't really care about touching the ball. I just want to win in life.
And then did you write on your eye black, fucking always open?
Yeah, fucking always open. Sometimes in life, you have to make a sacrifice if you want to win games. In life, there are stars and then there are role players. Sometimes you got to be the role player. And so my team was winning the pickup game, and I decided I'm going to shut the F up and get back on defense and get a rebound. Sometimes you got to do the dirty work. It's not always going to be glamorous, man. And it pisses me off when a guy as talented as George Pickens is half-assing routes. Because that's where I had an issue, Carson. I'll get into the Steelers' offense aspect of this in a minute. But when you're on the field, make the most of your opportunity. Run hard. Get open. You're just giving up. Like, I get that you're frustrated, George, but you're not even trying. Like, you're doubling down on being a nuisance. Like you were saying, I'm not even going to try. And I understand if George is frustrated because George is a very talented receiver. Like when I'm looking at him individually, I empathize and I sympathize with him a little bit. He's a very talented receiver that I think would be a beneficiary of being in a better offensive system with a more talented quarterback that could get him the football, where plays are more drawn up. So I understand his frustrations. But it's a team sport, and you're just making the game more about you than about the team. Like, when you were given those opportunities, you aren't making the most of them. Now, I do have a problem with Mike Tomlin in this situation too, Carson. Mike, I understand you were trying to send a message to this team, and I understand you were trying to send a message to George as an individual. What I will tell you directly, Mike, is we don't have the margin in offensive talent to bench a guy like George Pickens. George Pickens is by far the most talented offensive player that we have. Skill position or not, GP is the best one. He is a freak talent. Our second best wide receiver who is healthy right now is Calvin Austin III. That is a very, very large step down from GP. Our second most talented offensive player, period, is Jaylen Warren, who is currently injured right now. Our offense is not good enough to not have George on the field is what I'm telling you. And that's a reality of the situation. So I have issues with both of these guys from both sides. I think George is a baby. I think he has a very big ego on him, and he is frustrated that he doesn't get to touch the ball more. That I'm a little more angry at because I want football players who want to go out there and win the game, whether they touch the ball or not. I want winners. But I also have a problem with Mike trying to bring the hammer down too much. We don't have the margin to have a player like George off the field, and there's a very fine line between sending a message and hurting your team. And I think Mike crossed that line and hurt us against Dallas. We were lacking for offensive dynamic. And you texted me during the game, Carson. You said, hey, man, is George hurt? What the hell is going on? Why is he not on the field? It's clear that Mike was trying to send him a message. And also, my final point that I want to say to Mike Tomlin is, Mike, stop BSing us in the presser. Mike Tomlin came in the presser after the game and said, oh, there's no problem. We're just managing his snaps. Be honest. We're not dumb. You're insulting our intelligence, Mike. Tell us that I was sending a message to him. He has been a problem. He's been bitching and moaning. Be honest and upfront with us, because I don't like the fact that you're lying to us in the press conference, man. Keep it a buck, Mike. George has been a problem in the locker room, and I wanted to send him a message today because he's got to wear that one, Carson. I think Mike Tomlin has to wear the responsibility of our offense not producing because George was off the field. I'm frustrated, Carson. This is a long-standing issue of the Steelers' locker room, of our offense, diva wide receivers, Mike trying to send messages. I'm frustrated, man.
I think to some extent also it makes Pickens less accountable if you won't be forthcoming with the reason that he's not on the field, right? Because he went into a whole explanation of, well, it's actually sort of like pass rushers, right? Where you have a rotation and we just want to limit the snap count so these guys have their maximum energy and they can be healthy for the stretch of the season and they can be most productive and effective when they are on the field. And it's like, dude, Van Jefferson played like 85% of the snaps.
Bro, we're playing Scotty Miller and Van Jefferson.
Yeah, it was just ridiculous. And at the end of the game, you have another incident where Pickens pulls down Jordan Lewis by his face mask, clearly just tanked his effort on several routes, presumably where, like, he's not the first read, right? He's just trying to run a clear out route. But, like, you have to do that, man. You have to sell the route for it to be effective, for you to actually do your job. It's a really difficult situation because if he's not going to take it seriously, right? If he's not even going to run actual routes, well, then how can you have him on the field? At the same time, as you mentioned, the Steelers have no receiving talent outside of him. They desperately need him on the field. So I would err on the side of just putting him out there, especially when you're in the home stretch of a game. Like, just have your
Carson,
best player on the field.
Can
work
I throw you an idea real quick?
Yeah, please.
Mike, I have a magical idea. This week during practice, let's draw up and scheme some plays that George gets the ball. What do you think about that
also, don't you think he's kind of just being unnecessarily dramatic? Because, like, he got targeted 11 times the week before. He had a big game the week before.
GP's a big-time drama queen. He is.
Like, it's crazy to me. I just think it's totally unnecessary on his part, and it's not good, dude, and it makes you wonder, like, is he just a guy who needs to be with an elite quarterback? Like, is he a guy who needs to be in an offense where he's going to have a high-level quarterback throwing him the ball? They're going to throw him the ball more. Presumably, he'll still need to be the number one because, like, he's getting targets here. But no, he can't have a 1,500-yard season because the Steelers just aren't going to throw the ball that much, and they aren't going to throw the ball that effectively. But I think he's been playing really well, and I think he and Fields have a good connection. And I think that he's in for a successful season, but if he's not happy with the situation, I don't see that changing necessarily because this offense isn't going to get more pass happy, better quarterback play.
Yeah, and I mean, the track record shows that Pickens is going to be gone. Like I said, man, anybody that we've had an issue with at the wideout position, if it's money or if it's personality issues, AB, gone. Martavis Bryant, gone. Deontay Johnson, gone. Like, anytime, this is not a new issue for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and when push comes to shove, the wideout's gone. But what I'm scared about is now that we're down all those guys, we can't afford to lose George Pickens, because if we lose George Pickens, we are moving from, all right, 25th, best offense in the league to 31st best offense in the league. We're hanging out with the Patriots, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree completely. So we'll see. But I definitely don't think that this bodes well for the Pickens relationship in Pittsburgh. And as you say, they just cannot afford to be without him.
Just always something, man. Just always something. Like, I don't. And like you said, dude, I didn't understand the rumblings. Like, last year, maybe I get it. You get frustrated with Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky the entire year. But this year, it's like, him and Fields, I felt like he'd found something, and they had been pretty harmonious. And maybe it's just his personality in general. Like, I can see this from both sides, but for me as a coach, Carson, I feel like I'd be willing to look past. It's a messed up situation. I'd be willing to look past Pickens and his personality issues to put him on the field because he's so much more talented. But as you said, if he's not going to run routes and give full effort, why would I want to play a guy that's not going to give me 100%? It's a messed up situation, man. I wish GP could put his ego aside, and I wish Mike Tomlin could. I wish the Steelers' offense was good. You know what? That'll be my wish. I wish the Steelers' offense could be competent.
Yeah, it's crazy to have to deal with these sort of issues with an adult, with a third-year player. You know, it's 11-year-old behavior. Receivers, man, they're just different. And receivers' families. How many receivers' families do we see posting videos of them running routes where they're allegedly open and they don't get the ball? It's ridiculous, man. Most dramatic position in sports, it's not even close. The roller coaster of an NFL season is moving right along, and it promises to be a month full of tricks, treats, and of course, touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the #1 place to bet touchdowns.
Running it in from the 1 or an 80-yard bomb, we don't care how they score touchdowns. We want to bet on them. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like a player to score a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick.
Here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Let's move on to the power rankings, Logan. We'll start from the top as we always do. Who's in that one spot for you?
I'll keep it short and sweet. I gave you my big spiel on them earlier, and I've said this throughout the season. I will continue to hold this feeling and sentiment. The Kansas City Chiefs are my #1 team until further notice, until they lose a game. I'm not moving them out of my #1 spot. They have the best quarterback in football. I think they've got the best defense in football. I like their formula. I like their identity. They've still got playmakers. Kelsey, Kareem Hunt. When Pacheco gets back, they go up a notch. They've got the track record. I believe in this team still. Full throttle. So I got the Chiefs #1.
I have the Chiefs at 1 as well. I moved them down to 2 a couple weeks ago. I immediately regretted it. I don't think there's a massive margin there, but until they're dethroned, probably for the foreseeable future, I'm with you. I think that they belong in that 1 spot. Okay, who's #2 for you, Logan?
#2, this team has been trending upwards all season for me. I've got the Baltimore Ravens in my 2nd spot. As I've mentioned a bunch throughout our NFL shows, I think it's the best backfield in NFL history with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, the best skill position talent he has ever had. And I still very much believe in this defense. Now, I am a little bit more worried than last year. Again, down Mike McDonald. I'm concerned about the secondary. It's not about the front 7 whatsoever. I think this is a great run-stopping unit. I think they're really good at applying pressure and getting home versus the quarterback. It is all to do with the back line and them not allowing shot plays and limiting what other receivers can do in the passing game. But Lamar's even leveled up even more from where he was as a passer last year, man. I've been so impressed with him. What he did last week was amazing. So, yeah, I think these are the 2 best teams in football, the 2 teams atop the AFC, Baltimore and Kansas City. So I've got Baltimore 2.
I have Baltimore 1 spot lower at #3. This offense is completely dominant, like you say. Lamar and Henry, it's just an unstoppable combination. They're 2nd in net yards per pass attempt, and they're 1st in yards per rush attempt. I mean, it's just unbelievable what they're doing on that side of the ball. The only reason that they can't be in the #2 spot for me right now is I do need to see more from the defense. They're the #26 scoring defense right now. They're allowing as many yards per play as the lowly Bengals defense. And you mentioned up front, they have been really good against the run. I do have some questions about the linebacker room after Patrick Queen since he's moved on. But really, it is the secondary that needs to be better. I mean, they're talented. I think they will. I do think that this will be a good defense. But for now, I have them in #3 because, Logan, I think we've seen more consistent dominance overall from the Minnesota Vikings. I'm basically all in with Minnesota. I have them in my 2 spot. The only concern for this team remains Sam Darnold. because he has to hold up his end of the bargain. He has to play like an average starting quarterback, but I really think that that's all they need. We've been talking about how in the NFC, you don't have elite quarterbacks with elite rosters. That is not a mandate for you to be a contender in the conference. And I think this is the most complete roster. I think it is a sensational defense. I think they blitz the hell out of people. They pressure the hell out of people. I think the secondary has been underrated. I think that they're good there. They're a top 5 unit on that end. Offensively, they have great play calling. They run the ball really well. They protect. With TJ Hawkinson out there, like when this group is at full strength, I think it's pretty elite receiving talent, and Justin Jefferson is just a superhero who warps defenses and is really the MVP of this offense. I don't think it's an elite offense, but I think it's a good offense. I think it's an elite defense. I think their formula is very sustainable unless Darnold falls off a cliff, which I just don't think he's going to do. The comp that we've been bringing out, I think he's basically playing at a Jared Goff level. I think he's basically going to have a Jared Goff level season, which makes the comparison pretty easy because then you have him on a main NFC contender and you have Goff on a main NFC contender. I do think those teams are very close, but I have more questions about the Lions defense right now than I do about the Vikings offense. And I think that Vikings defense is dominant, so I slightly prefer them. I have them in my 2 spot.
Yeah, I've got the Vikings in my 6th spot, and I don't really care if people have any issues with it or not. I'm not sold on Sam Darnold yet. And again, Vikings fans can cry me a river. People who are really high on Minnesota, we're 5 weeks into the season. We still got 3, we're a third of the way through. We still got a lot more football to play. And the Sam Darnold quotient to me is still not one that I'm fully confident in. I do believe in this defense. I think they're a top 5 defense in the NFL. I think the skill position talent's great. I think the offensive line is great. But when you talk about them with Detroit, I do trust Goff more. I think the offensive line in Detroit's better. I think that defense is really damn good in Detroit. Buffalo, I trust Josh Allen a far sight more than I trust Sam Darnold. The Niners, I trust that team more than I trust Minnesota as a whole. So I have all of those teams above Minnesota, and I think people will go, well, what do the games matter at all? Do the records matter? Yes, individual performance week to week is what matters, and the Vikings have done well, but they almost blew the game against Green Bay. They should have lost that game against New York and London, and Sam Darnold to me is just...
I don't know that I agree with either of those because they were destroying the Packers. I don't think we can say they almost blew that. And why should they have lost the game to the Jets?
Rodgers gave them that game. Rodgers gave that game away.
But what indication did the Jets offense give against that defense that they were just going to score a touchdown?
They had the pick 6. Literally, the Jets offense outscored the Vikings offense 17-16. Look, all I'm saying is
elite. It's not a freak play when they do that. If the Bengals did it, you could say, okay, that's
all I'm saying is the Vikings are undefeated. I get that people may take issue with that. I'm just not sold on Sam Darnold yet. He is still a major, major question for me in the prospects of this team, and his job is easier. I believe in everything around Darnold. I'm just not sold on Darnold yet, and give me 2 more weeks. There's teams that I believe in more, man. I think that a lot of people are getting very, very high on Minnesota, and they're undefeated, rightfully so. I'm still going to wait and hold my judgment.
That's fine, and I will defend to death your right to say that, Logan, because we agree fundamentally. Power rankings, it's not about pandering to records. It's about how good do you think these teams are. So I had Minnesota at number 5 2 weeks ago when they were still 3-0. I just continue to be more and more impressed by them. And the fact that they've sustained this, even though this past week was not a good Darnold game, I just don't think they need him to do anything special. I really don't. I think this is a stacked football team that I dramatically underestimated. And it's not just that they're 5-0. It is an impressive 5-0. They manhandled the Niners. They destroyed the Giants, who are a more decent football team than we thought. They destroyed the Texans. Yes, they let up in the second half against the Packers, but dominated a majority of that game. And then they held on against the Jets, even though Darnold kind of played the worst football game that he could. Maybe not the worst, but it was not a good Darnold game. He was under 50% completion, multiple turnovers, and they still won. I just don't think he has to do anything more special than a Goff. And I'm with you. They're very close with the Lions for me because the Lions are so damn good in the trenches. But again, I have more questions about the back end of that Lions defense than I do this Minnesota offense, because I
And
just don't think Darnold has to be special.
I don't. I think the Darnold part of the equation kind of offsets my lack of faith in Detroit secondary.
How big of a gap do you see between a Goff and a Darnold right now?
I just trust Goff more. It's not very large, and that's what I want to hammer home. Is it's like I think about this when I do my power rankings and I'm struggling between two teams. I think about, if this team played this team head to head, well, who would I pick? And when I look at Minnesota versus Buffalo, I would take Buffalo to win. If Minnesota and San Francisco rematched, I know they lost, I would take San Francisco. If Minnesota played Detroit, and so on and so forth. Every team above them, I would take the other team. And quarterback is a very important factor in that. I would take Brock Purdy. I would take Goff. I would take Josh Allen. Quarterback's the most important position on the field. And so does how much better the Vikings are around Darnold outweigh the offset in the QB position? For a lot of these teams, they don't. So at number 3, I have got the Detroit Lions. I'm still very, very high on this football team. I do agree with you in what you just said, though. The key for both of these teams is to limit how much their quarterback has to do on a weekly basis. Like, I know that Goff had the perfect game and everybody wanted to hype that up. Y'all know that Dan Campbell gave the ball to J-Mo, right? It's like even Dan Campbell didn't. Dan Campbell was on the sideline. Even he was like, all right, man, Goff managed the game. This team runs the ball so well between the tackles. I know it's old school, but I love that smash mouth football recipe. Strong as hell in the trenches, going to apply pressure on the quarterback. On the offensive side of the ball, the offensive line is going to get pushed and dominate up front, and they run the hell out of the ball between the tackles. I love that formula. Goff is really good out of play action with his timing on routes, and he's a pretty good quarterback. And like Sam Darnold, he's got a ton of receiving talent around him. Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams. Like, the Lions and Vikings are very, very similar to me. But I have a different level of faith in the offensive line. I think the Lions' defense has gotten a lot better this year. I am still a little bit worried about the secondary. And that is, Carson, I think you make a great point. That is where the Vikings have a clear and distinct advantage to me, in the cornerback room. The Vikings have 3 cornerbacks deep that I trust more than I trust Detroit's. Like, Stephon Gilmore is your third guy, is an insane luxury to have. Even though he's older, that is insane to have that kind of depth at a very, very important position. So I do think the Vikings have an advantage there, but I basically trust everything else about the Lions more. And I'm always going to lean on trench teams. The Lions are one of the strongest trench teams in football. I think the best offensive line in football, and I really believe in that. So I've got the Lions at 3.
Yeah, I'm not far off with you here. I have the Lions at 4. I think this is a damn good football team. I think that they are guaranteed to be an elite offense because they've just added another legit weapon in the receiving game with the emergence of Jamison Williams. Their line is the best in football. Their run game is up there for the best in football outside of Baltimore. I definitely like them up front defensively. It's just, there are performances, right? Like, I mean, Seattle had a field day against this defense, and that's just the concern I have that slightly outweighs any concern I have with Minnesota. But I'm still very high on Detroit. Who's in your 4 spot, Logan?
So I've got the San Francisco 49ers in my 4 spot. I still think this is an exceptionally talented team, and I think this is probably the one that most people are going to have big issues with when they see the graphic on Instagram or they comment in the Discord, which you can join, by the way, link in our bio across all socials if you haven't. Come and talk some ball with the fellas. The Niners are 2-3. They have a losing record. I get it, right? If this was like college football, the Niners would not even be ranked. Somebody would have already leapfrogged them into the top 25. But I think they're 2 freak losses, the way they've lost these football games, marching down into the red zone. Jordan Mason fumbles, gives that game away. Against the Rams, Bell drops a pass. Boom, great punt return. Matt Stafford steals your heart. Just
convincingly outgained them. Didn't have a kicker against the Cardinals.
I mean, there's such strange anomalies of losses. And again, when I look at these guys in an individual game format, the Niners are very strong in the trenches. They're one of the most talented defenses in football. I like Brock Purdy. I think he's got real talent on the outside. Like, I believe in the Niners. We've seen them do this for 4 or 5 years now. 2 weeks of fluke losses is not going to fundamentally change how much I believe in the 49ers.
Yeah, I basically agree. I have the Niners at 5. I do think that the Vikings and Lions at this point have been more consistent as all-around football teams. Like, There are some concerns with the Niners. The defense has been pretty average. Hufanga has only played a couple games. He's an elite player, but he was out there this past week, and it wasn't a great defensive performance. And offensively, a lot of people have pointed out, I mean, they ranked dead last in yards after the catch coming into this past week at least, and that historically has been like a major strength of this offense. The offensive line hasn't been great, and also obviously they've had various injuries. But I think at full strength, this is a loaded offense. I think even without CMC, even if CMC doesn't play, this is a loaded offense. But with him, it especially is. It's still a dominant run game. Brock Purdy has still averaged the most yards per pass attempt of anybody in football this year. And I think the defense will improve. I don't think it's an elite defense. And that's probably the biggest reason that I have moved Detroit and Minnesota above them. I think we've seen enough from this defense. And when you consider the fact that the defense regressed in the home stretch of last year, to say that this isn't the powerhouse that we saw at their best last season. That's why I've moved them down to 5. The 2-3 record is just like not good, obviously, and their schedule is tough in the upcoming stretch. They have to win football games, and they have to win some tough football games, but they could so easily be 4-1. I haven't seen nearly enough to move me off of the Niners. I still think it's an elite offense. I think Purdy, although he didn't play a very good game this past week, has grown as a creator. I think he's played a little bit better overall this year. I'm not out on the Niners. I think they are very much still in the mix in the NFC. I prefer the Vikings and Lions now. And honestly, that top 4 is kind of like a little tier for me. Like, my red flags with everybody 5 and below definitely are greater than they are with those top 4 for me. But the Niners are still the 3rd team in the NFC.
It's you make a strong case, and I mean they are down some very key players that may not return this season. They obviously lose Javon Hargrave earlier in the year, which I think has made a big difference. Absolutely. They lost Dre Greenlaw in the Super Bowl. He has not played since then. I don't know if he's going to return this year. So it isn't the same defense from last year, but they're missing 2 really big pieces. I still think they're a good group. If Dre comes back and looks like himself, I think I may view this defense a little bit differently just because of how That's big fair. A difference maker he is. But right now, yeah, I don't really disagree. The Niners defense has been pretty underwhelming considering their standards.
Yeah. Okay. Who do you have in your 5 spot, Logan?
I have got your Buffalo Bills, Carson, and I also think people are going to take issue with this one. This one was close for me, admittedly, between Minnesota, but it comes down to my faith in Josh Allen. And this probably isn't the week to make this case just because Josh played one of the worst games I've seen from him at the QB position in his career. And I think you see that because they're down Khalil Shakir, and that is an injury that the Bills are not able to withstand. So I think that's a really big red flag about this football team. I think the defense is better than they've shown. I think Josh is way better than he played last week, but I really do wonder if this team should go out and see if they can acquire another wideout, that could take maybe some more Mac Hollins reps or, just to filter in with this group, because I like the group as a whole, but when you're missing one of the parts, you kind of see the issues with everybody else, and Shakir is the best of the bunch. So I wonder if the Bills should maybe go out on the market and see if they can find another wide receiver 2, another one of these big wide receiver 1s, just because I do think that's an issue that it could rear its ugly head. I mean, you lose one of these wideouts, I think you see the offense lose something, but specifically when we're looking at Minnesota versus Buffalo, I think Minnesota's got the better skill position talent. I think they've got the better defense. I think they've got the better line. But there's such a large gap in quarterback play to me, and that's just my belief in Josh Allen. And people can get mad about that. I believe in Josh Allen that much. And I'll cut him a little bit of slack too. I think he got rocked last week. Obviously, this doesn't make up for the first 2 or 3 quarters or whatever before the concussion. But I do think Josh was concussed in that game, and so him struggling late was because of that. But it wasn't a great game for Buffalo, and I think Buffalo's prone to having these sort of games. If Josh, that's how much Josh is responsible for on this team. If Josh plays a bad game, the Bills are going to lose. It's as simple as that. And you can't afford Josh having an off game. But I believe in Josh enough and him avoiding these games and playing like a superhero. That's why I still have the Bills above Minnesota.
I have the Bills at number 6. So we have the same teams in our top 6, just in a different configuration. I don't think Josh was concussed. I do want to address that because I don't want to give him an excuse. And also, I just don't think that they would have let him back in the game. I mean, the way that his head hit the field, it
Nah,
looked like a
man,
concussion.
y'all were not letting Mitch Trubisky throw that ball.
Well, it's not the Bills' choice, though. They've got the neutral trauma consultant.
Look, man, they broke out that smelling salt real quick.
Yeah, I don't know. I agree. They definitely did not want Mitch Trubisky on the field, but I don't think that the neurotrauma consultant would have let him back out there. But anyways, he was back out there, and he didn't play good football before that hit, regardless. He didn't play a good game. I'm basically back to where I was before the season with the Bills. In fact, I think I had them at number 6 in our first edition of Power Rankings. They're a very good team, probably not one that will truly contend for the Super Bowl, as I started to think that they could after the first 3 weeks. But yeah, I think some people will overreact because they have a sour taste in their mouth from the last 2 weeks, which haven't been good, although they still very easily could have won this past week despite not playing a good game. They're still the number 3 scoring offense. They're still 4th in point differential, even losing a blowout game to the Ravens. And I still think this is going to be an elite offense. I still think it's the most balanced group with James Cook. Joe Brady's frustrated me the last couple games. I still think he's a better play caller than Ken Dorsey for sure. Josh is a superhero. They need Shakir on the field badly because although we can talk about how, Diggs' departure doesn't matter as much as you think, when you're without Khalil Shakir, it does. And dudes just could not separate this past week, and it was really tough to watch. They need him on the field, but with him out there, I think it's a damn good offense. My concerns with the Bills, the reason I can't have them higher, I think the defense has kind of been exposed these last 2 weeks. They are without Matt Milano. They are without Taron Johnson, but there's a couple areas where they would be struggling regardless of if those guys were on the field. They're 23rd in pressure rate. Part of that is they're dead last in blitz rate. The Bills do not bring more than 4 rushers often at all. They like to sit back in coverage in their soft zones. But I expected a little more out of this defensive front. I like that group, and I think that you've seen that they're not the biggest, strongest up front ultimately, and so they haven't quite gotten the push that I would have liked to see. And they're dead last in rushing yards per attempt allowed. And I do think Milano's return definitely helps that. I think Taron Johnson also is a really physical corner who is helpful in the run game. But it's not going to fix it. It's not going to take them from last to above average. The Ravens game alone did kind of skew these numbers, but I still think that they need to improve there. And I think that offensively, although I think they're a very good unit, the O-line needs to be better against high-end defenses, good pass rushes. We've seen that the last 2 weeks. And the receivers need to separate better against high-end secondaries. We've seen that the last couple weeks. So those are all factors, and then I'm worried about the coaching in big games. I don't think that's going to keep them from winning 11 games in the regular season, but when we talk about the ceiling, I don't know. I just do not like Sean McDermott. I think he's terrible situationally and in terms of game management, as we've seen, unfortunately, too many times at this point. So overall, I still think it's going to be a lead offense, probably top 5 offense, above average defense because they are talented there and they will get healthier, and McDermott does bring you a defensive floor. They're a really good football team. If you're out on them, I think you're wrong. They're going to rack up some wins in this upcoming stretch of the regular season, but I also think that I was too high on them after the first 3 games, and I think that we've seen why over these last 2 weeks.
Yeah, do you think there's anything that the defense already does at a really high level? One thing I wanted to add was I think that I'm a little concerned about the safeties too. But
yeah, I think the corners are excellent. I think that the linebackers with Milano out there will be pretty damn good because I think that Bernard is really good. I think that when they have 3 linebackers on the field, Dorian Williams has been good overall. Like, I don't think that there's a glaring weakness. I'm just a little disappointed with the front, honestly, because that's where I expected them to be better. Although, actually, I agree with you. The second safety spot, the free safety spot, they need to figure out because DeMar Hamlin's not good there. Cole Bishop struggled this past week. That's the one position that I'm looking at. I like Taylor Rapp as your strong safety.
Yeah, those are my concerns. But again, man, I mean, Josh can make up for a lot of them. So I've got the Vikings at number 6. At number 7, I've got the Green Bay Packers, and I've been impressed with Green Bay, man. I really, this defense over the past couple of weeks, their secondary, I've been really impressed with basically everybody in that group. I think their defense is better than we thought. You know, we were a little concerned, especially after week 1 against Philadelphia, watching them get marched on like that. I think the defense is a lot better than that. I don't think they're elite at getting pressure, but the secondary is good. I think they're a decent run stopping unit. And then this offense can just be explosive. Like Jordan Love is really responsible for how great they can be. But I like the depth of the receiving room, and they're so good at creating big time shot plays at timely moments in games, man. Like Love is so great at connecting on those. And then I think they've been able to run the ball in a different way that they haven't been able to this year. So the Packers are like right on that contender cusp for me. I think that a couple of things would have to break their way in the playoffs, and it would be shocking, but they're not like out of my contender tier. I believe in Jordan Love. I think this is the best running game he's ever had. I like the receiving core, and the defense is improving week after week to me, man, and they're extremely well coached. I gotta give credit to Matt LaFleur for that. So the Packers are a really solid group every single week, and that's enough to crack my top 10, man. I don't know if they're necessarily elite at anything outside of this passing game with Jordan Love, but they're really stout, they're really solid, and they're really well coached. And so they're like right outside of that elite group of teams for me.
That's interesting. I don't have the Packers on my list. The Packers would be my 11th team.
That's surprising to me.
I think I'm more worried about the defense than you are. I think whenever we've seen them face decent offenses, they've struggled. I mean, the Eagles shredded them. The Vikings destroyed them. And the Rams were able to move the ball really quite easily. I mean, they outgained them in that game. Packers have been living off of takeaways. They have 14 takeaways in 5 weeks, and still, they haven't been a super effective defense. Well, the Vikings are like dominant in terms of pressure rate, and they're stifling people a lot more than the Packers are. I am not at all sold on this defense.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think that's part of it, and the other thing is I really like the offense. No question about that. I'm a little more worried about Jordan Love than I was the home stretch of last year. I just think he's got to be smarter. I think he's got to take better care of the football. It's a lot of turnovers through the 3 games that we've seen. There's not at all a big gap between my 10 and 11, but I'm not as confident in the defense as you are. I am confident in the offense. I think the play calling is great. The run game is great. I do like the receiving room, and I do like who they have at quarterback, but I don't see a super high ceiling for this team right now. I don't think there's necessarily a huge gap between my 7 and 11, but in my 7 spot, I have a team that a lot of people were bringing up in similar conversations, sort of like the AFC counterpart to the Packers and the NFC before the year. I have the Texans. I think the Texans check a lot of boxes. Offensively, right, they have ridiculous skill position talent. They have a young quarterback who I have significantly more faith in than Love. I think that Stroud is much more consistent. I think he's playing at like a fringe top 5 level. Not in there, but just outside it. And their defense has been quite good. They are great up front in terms of pass rush, and their secondary is really good. They're 4th in defensive yards per play allowed. They're 9th in pressure rate. My only concerns with the Texans are offensively, their ability to run the ball, and their line isn't great. And defensively, their ability to stop the run. They're 25th in terms of yards allowed per rush attempt, and their run game hasn't been effective offensively since week 1. So those are the 2 things that keep them from being like a top-tier contender to me, where I think some people might look at them and say they're 4-1. They have all this fun offensive talent. Why can't they be there? But I've really been impressed by the defense overall. Just outside of the run defense and the linebackers, I think there's a lot of good stuff, enough good stuff to where I feel pretty confident about them at number 7. I didn't really consider moving them lower.
I've got them at number 8 in a spot behind Green Bay. I basically agree with everything you said. CJ in this offensive group, like this receiving group, I think could go toe-to-toe with anybody in a shootout on any given Sunday. They're that talented. And then, I think the secondary is great, and I think the pressure they've been able to get home is amazing. So those are cores of great teams. They can move the ball through the air. They can get pressure home. They can defend on the back end. Texans are really solid. I look at them and the Packers in a very similar tier.
Okay. I don't think that's unfair. My number 8, we didn't get to see play this past week. I still have the Eagles here. They're tough to evaluate because A.J. Brown's played 1 game. I mean, they didn't have any offensive talent on the field in terms of receivers in their last game. So their record really doesn't say a ton to me right now. I don't think this defense is good. I don't think there's reason to be in on this defense, even though they're talented, because they've still struggled this year. I don't think Jalen Hurts has been very good, and I don't like Sirianni. But with A.J. Brown healthy, I think this offense can just explode. I mean, they're dominant in the trenches. Saquon Barkley is arguably the best healthy running back in football. They have arguably the best receiving tandem in football when they're healthy. Like, I don't think Hurts holds you back from being a dominant offense, even though I wish he made quicker decisions. I wish he took better care of the football. All that is true. I still think they're an elite offense. And I honestly had a real debate between them and a counterpart in their division, Logan, who was also an elite offense and a flawed defense. And that team has shown us more this year, but I think Philly at full strength is just more stacked. And I do think their defense, although it's still flawed, is definitely better. And I need to see a little bit more maybe from the team in my 9 spot before I'm moved to view them as the favorite in their division, even though I think they're very close. And they've certainly been the best team so far, but Philly's a tough test case because of all the injuries they've had and some of the weirdness there.
Yeah, I agree. Lane Johnson's going to come back this week too. So, I mean, they've been down an offensive lineman that's crucial to this team. But they're 25th defending the pass in terms of yards per attempt. They're 28th in rushing yards per attempt defensively. They just released Devin White, who, I don't think it's been a huge difference maker for them through the beginning of this season, but it is a big loss. Like, this defense has just fallen off since their Super Bowl run. But they're too talented to me to eliminate from the list altogether. So they come in at number 9. So we're agreeing outside of the top 5, or except outside of the top 6, except for Green Bay here. So I presume you have.
Don't presume anything. Don't assume anything, especially. You'll make an ass out of you and me. I will say the Devin White thing, I mean, he's just washed to hell. He wasn't even getting on the field, but it's a crazy fall off. Crazy fall off for the boy. I do have Washington at number 9, though. Wow. I'm just being a cheeky little flirt.
Wow.
Look, man. Do I think we're going to see some regression from this team? I do. However, I think this is an elite offense. I mean, they're averaging 3.4 points per drive still, and I was expecting to see a little bit of a comeback to earth performance offensively against the Cleveland Browns. I mean, obviously, they're bad as a football team, but that defense is still pretty damn good, and they just destroyed them. I mean, they're just marching down the field every drive and putting up 40 pieces or hitting the mid-30s against everybody, it feels like. And it was a couple bad defenses before Cleveland, but then they did it to Cleveland. They're top 5 in both passing and rushing efficiency. I just think we're seeing brilliant play calling and offensive design from Kingsbury. I think that Jaden Daniels is playing out of his mind. And right now they've been the best offense in football. I don't expect them to quite sustain that, but they'll be in the conversation, I think. Defensively, though, I do think that they suck. They're 27th in yards per drive allowed. They're 28th in points per drive allowed. I think they're a bottom 5 defense. And that's why when we talked this past week about teams that would come back down to earth, I mentioned them. Because I do think it's coming, right? They're not going to continue on this 4-1 pace for the rest of the season. But I think they're a playoff team. I think this offense is just so ridiculous. Nobody else has shown me as much this season. And I think that they're due for a little bit of offensive regression, but I think as long as they can keep running the ball, as long as they can keep having an effective screen game, like keeping their principles in place, they're going to hit on a couple shots with Jaden. He's going to make some special plays with his legs, and boy, have they been tough to stop.
I like it. I like it a lot. I do think they're going to come back to earth. I think that them, Chicago, Tampa Bay, and Dallas, I think, will be battling probably for a wild card spot at the end of the year. Maybe not. Somebody's going to win that division. I don't know. Philly, Washington, Dallas, 2 of those teams who don't win the division are going to be battling for that wild card spot. Because I think Washington could win the division. Like, Philly is flawed. Dallas is flawed. And
they got a leg up in record right now.
Yeah, and I like the vibes in Washington right now, man. I like Dan Quinn as a head coach. The team is just full of energy. And
they have the easiest schedule, too. Their schedule's not tough. They just got to win their in-division games. That'll be the biggest determinant.
So I'm not going to lie. Like, I considered Washington for my 10 spot here. I considered 5 different teams. I came down to 3. The 3 teams were the Atlanta Falcons, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the team that I ended up going with in my number 10 spot is the Seattle Seahawks. Oh. And I know the Seahawks have been a little disappointing too in recent memory, right? Coming back down to earth, kind of like the Steelers. But I believe in Geno Smith, man. Geno has a lot to do with this. Geno's just a playmaker. Like, again, he came up with over 90% of the Seahawks' total offense in this last game, over 300 yards of offense individually. He had that big rush, which I saw was pretty cool film on tape. Jackson Smith-Njigba pretends to go and catch a ball over his shoulders, which takes two defenders with him on the go route, which just opens up a wide open seam for Geno. It's an awesome play. But I believe in Geno. The skill position talent is offense. This offense has been so much more dynamic without Shane Waldron. Geno leads the NFL currently in total passing and rushing yards by a quarterback. JSN, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. I think they're loaded there. And the defense is better than I thought. I think the secondary is bordering on elite with Woolen, with Witherspoon. And the defensive line and front seven are a little better. My issues are still the same with the Seahawks. And the reality is, the rest of this season, as you mentioned with our top teams, Carson, the teams in this range are all going to be flawed in some way. The flaws of the Seahawks, their offensive line is bad, like one of the worst in the league. And I don't like their front seven as much as I do other teams. But every team in this group is flawed. And so when I look at them, I like their offensive talent more than other teams, and I like their secondary more than other teams. And I think this defense is – the personnel is not great, but I think they're going to continue to get better as they're coached under Mike McDonald as this season goes along. So I believe in the Seahawks more than I did a few weeks ago, but I could see you going with a handful of different teams here. If it's the Chargers, if it's the Falcons, if it's the Cowboys, I'd hear an argument out for a lot of teams in this 10 spot, but I'm going to go with Seattle.
There's definitely a lot of teams, and there's a lot of NFC teams, dude. I mean, you mentioned the playoff race. Like, there's going to be a lot of teams in the mix. I think the Seahawks are a fine choice. I do think their formula is just a little tough to sustain with how bad the line is, how reliant they are on Geno, and how average the defense is. I picked them as a wild card team. I can still absolutely see it, but it's tough. I mean, they put an insane burden on Geno every week. In my 10th spot, though, I have a team that you could maybe say the same thing for, but I do think they're a little more talented overall. The Cowboys have worked their way back into my 10 spot, Logan. That's not unreasonable.
They beat the Steelers, man. They beat the Steelers, bro.
Here's the thing. No, I agree. Their last two wins haven't been super impressive. This was a debate, though, between them and the Packers. And when I looked at these two teams on paper, I trust Dak more than I trust Jordan Love. I think the healthy Cowboys defense is definitely still better than the Packers. Both of these are flawed defenses, no doubt. But also, like, the Cowboys defense got exposed by a couple of really good offenses. So I think that maybe I was a little bit overreactionary on the defensive side of the ball for them in the negative direction. I was definitely too high on this team. I was too high on this defense preseason. I'm not walking my way back on any of that. I don't think that this team is remotely a contender. I think that this defense is probably pretty average. I think that this offense relies a lot on Dak, but I think they can have an elite passing attack. I think that they've found a little something in the run game with Dowdle. Like, I think they're more respectable there. I still think it's a talented all-around football team. It's not a big difference for them between me and the Packers, but again, I trust them more in those two key areas in terms of projecting the rest of the season. They've got to do it against better teams. We'll see. They're not a super impressive 3-2, but I think some of the things that you buy in on with the Cowboys are still there and are still worth buying in on.
All right, man.
It's 10. They're number 10. Man. Come on.
You know, I will give them – don't get me wrong. I thought about Dallas for this spot too. I couldn't put them over Washington. I wouldn't put them over L.A. at this point, the Chargers, or the Falcons. They still got a little bit more to show me. I was still disappointed with Dak against the Steelers with those turnovers. So – But the thing about the Cowboys is they still have the talent, and the talent isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, they did win against Pittsburgh. It's not the most convincing win without Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, and that's the edge I would give Dallas's defense over other ones, is they have two legitimate difference makers that can make their pressure great.
Yeah.
Where other teams just don't have that kind of personnel. So I'm going to goof on you just because I goof on the Cowboys all the time. But I understand this pick, and it's a natural progression of the Dallas Cowboys, man. They're going to sell all their stock. It's going to plummet, and then
creeps back up, and then it plummets again.
But we're on the upward trajectory. Buy in. The stock is low right now. You just got to sell it right before it comes crashing back down to earth.
Yeah, this upcoming stretch of the schedule, though, I mean, they're really going to get tested, bro. Oh, my God. Listen to this. Lions at the Niners, at the Falcons, Eagles, Texans, at the Commanders. We'll see what this team's made of.
We'll
see what this team's made of. I think going 500 in that stretch, pretty good, because then it lightens up after that. So, yeah, I'm definitely not all the way in on the Cowboys. I don't think that I will be again this year unless the defense has a massive resurgence. But you mentioned it, man. I mean, that pass rush is still absolutely has the potential to be dominant. All right, everybody. There you go. There you have it. All of our thoughts on the news of the week, our full power rankings. You can find more of our content, of course, on our YouTube channel, all of our NFL reaction stuff, all of our NBA season preview content, film breakdowns on both the NBA and NFL. You can also listen to the show across all audio platforms. You can follow us across social media, TikTok, Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. You can join our Discord, as Logan already so effortlessly plugged. And that's it. We don't have merch up right now, unfortunately. We're working on getting that back up for you guys. So, with that, as always, appreciate you. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.